and Senior Advisor to the President at the Heritage Foundation. Good afternoon, Cauley. So the President attending the oral arguments today, appearance is historic, his appearance. Anything to be said about his presence, in your view?
Well, it's unique. It's very Trumpian. Presidents in the past haven't done so, I think, out of due respect to a co-equal branch of the government. But I don't think that'll have any impact on how the justices are going to rule ultimately in June.
Right. Okay. And the hearing was around 90 minutes. I think you were tuning into it. Can you just give us to you what stood out during this oral argument?
So the oral arguments were presented by the Solicitor General of the United States and the head of the ACLU. They both did an outstanding job representing their respective arguments that they'd put in writing, of course, before the hearing. The first thing that jumped out to me is that John Sauer, the Solicitor General, mentioned in answering a question that if the court were to rule for the government, in other words, uphold the executive order banning birthright citizenship under the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, that it would only be applied prospectively, not retroactively. So that was sort of a news item. The rest of the argument was really what I expected to hear based on the written briefings. And they focused on what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means and their interpretation of this case called Wong Kim Ark, whether that decision stood for birthright citizenship or actually supported the government's position that it did not stand for birthright citizenship.
Okay, so on the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof, can we get your comments on that in terms of what does it mean, the jurisdiction of the United States?
Right. So that was what a lot of the arguments centered around. So the president and those on his side say that the original public meaning of that phrase means political allegiance to the United States. So it would exclude children born to illegal aliens. It obviously excludes children born to foreign diplomats or an invading force. The ACLU's argument and the certified class of people who were born to parents illegally here in the United States say, no. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the civil and criminal laws of the United States. That if you're an illegal alien and you're in this country and you commit a crime, you can be prosecuted. So you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and birthright citizenship has been the norm for a long time. So don't disrupt the norm.
Okay, what is your view? What is your position on the consequences or the impacts of automatic birthright citizenship so far on the United States?
Well, I think it goes beyond any question that we're an outlier country. No country in Europe allows for birthright citizenship. But as a policy matter and as a legal matter, we have interpreted the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment to allow for birthright citizenship. And so the reason that other countries don't do it and we do it is in the case of the United States, it acts as a magnet for people to come here illegally, have a child here in the country, and then that child sponsors the parents, and then we have this chain migration or birth tourism, which we have in the United States. And so if the court were to side with the president and applied this constitutional interpretation prospectively, it would turn off that incentive. It would be seen as a shot heard around the world to some folks who want birthright citizenship, but I think it would be just implemented like any other Supreme Court rule. And it doesn't mean illegal immigration will stop. It just means that an illegal who has a baby in this country wouldn't have the privilege of citizenship for their child and then themselves and their extended family members.
Okay, I'm wondering as well if you could explain, is there a national security aspect to this as well? Is there an argument that allowing foreigners from adversarial countries, for example, like China, to come to the U.S. and give birth to U.S. citizens, and those citizens whose allegiance may not be the United States, is there an argument for that?
Obviously, and you made it. And actually, it was brought up during the argument in the court. Chief Justice John Roberts asked, he said, even though we don't focus on policy, what is the estimate of how many children who are born who are from illegal aliens are born in the United States? And John Sauer, the Solicitor General, said, well, by some estimates, there's already been 1.5 million Chinese babies born to illegal aliens here in the United States. And he also pointed out that according to another organization, there are 500 companies in China that focus on getting Chinese people into the United States or into the territories for the purpose of establishing birthright citizenship. Now, the court will not rule on the policies and the policy implications of their rulings should not be part of any proper constitutionalist ruling, but that is sort of floating around the sidelines of this case.
So another topic during today's hearing was implementation, and you mentioned that briefly in an earlier comment. Where do you stand? What is your position of implementation of no automatic birthright citizenship? I mean, would every hospital then have to check patients or parents' immigration status?
So Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, others asked exactly that. How would this practicably be implemented? I mean, and the Solicitor General said, well, by the way, when a child is born in the United States today, they are given citizenship immediately, no matter who they are. But he didn't have a fleshed out answer for how it would be implemented. And I don't think anyone really knows exactly how it would be implemented. Somehow, the only thing he did say is that that family who would be denied citizenship for their child who was born would affirmatively have to petition the government for citizenship to say, no, actually we are citizens, and the burden would be on them to prove that they are a citizen, thus allowing their child to get citizenship. But I don't think anyone really has an answer to that question.
All right. Let me just ask you one last question here. It's been a great discussion, but what would you think would be the impacts, if the Supreme Court upholds birthright citizenship, that anyone born in the U.S. is automatically a citizen?
No one would feel any different than they feel right now. That's the state of the law in the land. And if the court sides with the ACLU and against Trump's executive order, it'll be just like we felt this morning and yesterday and 10 months ago and 10 years ago. Birthright citizenship has been the norm in this country. So if the court sides with the ACLU, nothing changes. It just depends on how they write the decision and whether they rule on the constitutional side of it or whether they rely on a statute. When asked which she would prefer, the ACLU lawyer says, well, we'd like to win either way, but we would prefer the constitutional route because that will cement things for the future.
Well, all right, colleague, good to speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
The FBI arrests a sex offender accused